and then we press record.
Cool. Is it picking up? Yeah, it's picking us up. Okay. Do you know what you want to get?
I'll probably just get the big pizza. I mean, I always say that I did that so that I can take leftovers, but
You never take leftovers?
I never take leftovers because it's just so good. And then the cavatelli is really good, but it's more expensive and there's just less food, so.
It's good food, though.
It is good food. I just care a lot more about, for some reason I still always care about like calories per dollar, even when I'm at a really nice restaurant.
I'm the same way.
I
I'm
don't
pretty
get
sure
it.
it's my mom's influence.
Yeah, in the same way where it's like even when I'm at the grocery store, it's kind of like trying to save $5 on Coke, right?
That's true.
You're not gonna get anything?
I'm thinking about it. I think I might get the garlic bread. Because I'm sure you'll have some with me.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, if I get a pizza, it just means that I won't finish the pizza, which is probably better for me.
I've got food in the fridge at home anyway. Oh, excuse me. Oh, or I could do the chef's board. That was really good last time.
Yeah. Why can't I even see it? Oh, it's the... I'm blind. I'm absolutely blind. Wasn't the... I mean,
Didn't we like it?
the truffle bread's really good, but the bread on the chef's board, isn't it like really quite crunchy or dry?
I don't remember.
Or am I not remembering it? Oh well.
That was the night of the election. We've had other things on our mind.
True. We were the only one having a good time. That was a weird night, that one.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe I think I'll just stick with tea. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, what are we going to name it?
The podcast?
Yeah, the podcast.
I suppose this is where I shine, since you suck at naming.
I do suck at naming things, right? But, because like some of the names, I mean, because we've talked about this. When was the first time we talked about this, doing potentially a podcast together?
Like a
Months
year ago.
Was it a year ago now?
It was ages. I think it was like before I went to
Yeah.
my trip.
One of the names that I remember from back then was having some sort of catchy title like 52 Weeks Till the Wedding or something. Where
Oh,
we,
right.
Where we
did
did a
countdown.
podcast weekly until the wedding or something like that.
But that's kind of up in the air right now in terms of planning.
Yeah, but it's not so much about being exactly 52 weeks till the wedding. It's just, a catchy title so that people are kind of interested in the evolution of our relationship over the course of 52 weeks. And then after the wedding, you could be like 52 weeks after the wedding. Or like...
The wedding still has to take place in between those two things.
I'm just... All right, I'm thinking about this not from like a realistic perspective, but like a marketing perspective.
I still want to choose something else.
Yeah, I know for sure, but like... And the other thing is that what are we actually going to use our names during this podcast? Because we could just stay more or less anonymous.
No, I think we should use our names.
Yeah, but I don't really want people who follow me because of like the Jane audience to find this, I guess. But I still want to kind of share it with people, I suppose. So, I mean, my alt account is Mr. Harvard, so we could do kind of like Mr. and Mrs. Harvard, almost like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that movie with
Yeah, the spies.
it was Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, right?
I'll just channel my inner Angelina Jolie for this.
Yeah. All right, Miss Writer, what's your suggestions for the title?
I'm drawing a huge blank right now. This is terrible.
Yeah,
You could
you're on the
choose
spot.
something like
Thank you so much. Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things is going to be getting the atmosphere, right? I think that's kind of going to be one of the cool things about making this podcast is that if we do just keep recording these episodes while we're out at a restaurant or something, like you have the background noise, you have, whenever the waiters come over, they're going to
Why
talk
don't
to
we
us or
make
take
the
our
name
order.
kind of a joke on that then? Like, I don't know, my super original self is thinking Coke and tea right now.
Oh,
But
Jesus. I mean, at some point, I'm not going to drink Coke every single time we go out.
I know, but it is kind of a joke that you do drink Coke when we go out a lot.
Only when I'm like really working hard. When I'm kind of more like in a holding pattern, I always go back to water. But I mean, like when I really push, like 12-hour days or something. It's just caffeine and calories keep me going. So I don't know. The one thing I suppose that we should try and figure out is kind of what sounds best too, because like the recorder's good, but we'll need to get the audio levels correct, and you know, so because right now it's left and right, and we could mix it into mono, but yeah, I don't know. I almost am scared to move the recorder because I could try and like demonstrate what it would sound like in different orientations, but it would also probably give people vertigo if they're listening to this with headphones. So
Do you want to publish this episode?
I was thinking that we might show it to a few people to get feedback.
I think it should be like a tester, though. Like a
Yeah,
soft
I mean,
test.
like, because what we're really trying to do is kind of brainstorm or find a new format, right? So,
I kind of like the idea of it being left and right, though, because it feels more like you're at the table.
I suppose, yeah. It does give you a little bit more of a
Ambient.
immersive and ambient. We are going for atmospheric, and I think that this episode is not this episode, but this kind of format would be slow enough to really work with kind of a passive listening, something that you do, along the lines of like mukbang, or people who play this while they themselves are eating, or if they wore headphones while they were eating this, they could be, have company as if there were two other people sitting at the table with them. So you could almost kind of, like, one of the things that we could do is we could set up the audio recorder on the table such that it's broken into thirds, where you and I are sitting at like a table where we're, what would it be, how many, 120 degrees apart from each other, and then both 100 degrees away from the mic, so that somebody could set it up where our voices kind of would come
On
from
either side.
where they would have kind of like chairs in their living room or anything like that. So that might be an interesting way to do it, I suppose.
I think that'd be a really cool effect.
I mean, one of the things, so instead of doing it microphone placement like this, we could do, that would make it more, I mean, we switched sides, but that would be kind of more what it's like. The other thing is that it's going to make it, I mean, if we set it up like that, though, that means that the waiter is always going to,
Be loud.
well, not be loud, it'll be like approaching from behind the person who's listening, right?
Well, I mean, that's pretty realistic.
True. True. Well, I mean, and the other thing is that this will kind of like let the waiters know that there is kind of like a recorder on the table, right?
Yeah.
So, now that we have sufficiently fucked with people's spatial sense, I won't move the recorder. All right.
I don't know. I like the idea of naming the podcast after some kind of inside joke about this whatever
About
environment.
like eating out at restaurants or something like
Yeah.
that? I suppose. It doesn't really kind of allude to anything about what we're talking about, but I suppose that's not what
It's not the
matters,
purpose.
because we could be talking about anything. Like, we have our beliefs and opinions and interests and passions right now, but if we keep doing this, then it'll change pretty constantly, and we don't
Exactly.
want to kind of have to move off of that, so.
That's one of the issues you run into a lot with like stories and stylized
Yeah, I mean, like, if
titles,
you're
is it
talking about
restricts you.
you're writing serials, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, if one gets popular, you're gonna have to keep writing it whether or not you like it. Or with me, if I get popular for a specific game, I'm gonna have to keep playing that game. So I do like the idea of kind of making it nondescript, but yeah.
That also maximizes relatability.
Maximizes relatability. Look at you.
I know. It's like I use words for a living or something.
Yep. Well, that also seems like something that I would say when I was talking about like content strategy or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
So my 4 R's of content: remarkable, relatable, repeatable, and romantic. So we've got repeatable because we can just do this whenever we're going out for lunch as well. And then I think that, because one of the things that I found interesting is when I've been writing blog posts or writing out long thoughts on Twitter or anything like that, just the fact that there is the presence of an audience or like a potential
It's
future
changing
audience.
your voice right now.
Well, it's changing the voice, and it changes like what we talk about. A lot of these thoughts are just kind of happening out loud. Where, I mean, some of these thoughts I don't think we would voice to each other. We would just kind of leave them unsaid, right? So it's one of the things that I've been contemplating, I guess, is just how context shapes language and communication. So. And I do think that, it's one of the things, because you've experienced that with writing while you're on Twitch, right? Don't you think that, and I could be wrong here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the writing sessions that you do when you're live on Twitch seem to be more productive than the writing sessions you do when you're not live.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is in a social environment like that where you're organizing time and you're deliberately setting aside time to work on something, it's a lot I don't check like Facebook and stuff when I'm on
Yeah.
Twitch, right? It's keeping me away from the usual distractors that would eat up still the time that I'm sitting at the computer.
And I wonder if that's because instead of like you still have like the diffuse thoughts or the quiet part of your mind that's thinking about other things outside of the conversation. Where it's like, if we're having a conversation that's not 100% engaging, then maybe the quiet part of my brain is thinking about Twitter or Twitch or work or business or things like that. Whereas now it would be thinking about the audience. And I was talking about this, I don't remember with who, but I was saying that, if I am having a conversation with somebody else or listening to a podcast, I am more engaged in the conversation, or I can absorb the information from the podcast better if I'm playing Tetris competitively at the same time.
Yeah, you mentioned that last
Yeah,
night.
so it's like, on a call last night. How you doing? What are you gonna do?
You go first.
I'll do the pig pizza.
White truffle garlic bread.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I was on a call last night with someone, and we were just talking, but while we were talking, I was looking outside at the city skyline of our window, right? And with that, I was, like my mind was wandering and looking at the buildings or looking at the flow of traffic. You just think weird little things. You're not 100% it, but if you're doing something that kind of, I feel, just makes your brain capacity go at 100%, but it's not using, or like, I think the cool thing about Tetris and talking is that Tetris doesn't use any language parts of your brain, but it still occupies your focus enough so that like no parts of your, like the parts of your brain that are not being utilized aren't stealing any resources from the language or conversational part of your brain.
Well, I think that what you're talking about, where you have kind of, I know Tetris might be a weird way of describing this, but essentially like the fidgeting, being occupied by the game. I think that happens for a lot of people in different ways. Like, I've noticed that during conversations with people, especially conversations that are serious, I play with things all the time while I'm thinking about it. And it's not distracting from the conversation. It's just I need to have some kind of tactile thing in my hands. If it's a ring, I'm twisting it. If it's a piece of paper, I'm folding it into a snowflake. Like, I just... And it has no bearing on the conversation, but like not having that would be very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it would also make it really hard for me to talk. I've noticed that as well. Like in therapeutic sessions where where I'm just sitting in a chair talking to someone, it's very difficult for me to talk versus if I have something in my hands to distract myself with from whatever it is that's forming the mental barrier. I think it actually frees up your thinking a little bit easier in terms of communication.
It's one of those things where, when we were talking about like ritual epistemology, you're just kind of figuring out little, not rituals, maybe routines is more accurate, but it's kind of, we're figuring things out through experimentation that really help us focus, where I don't know any scientific explanation of it. I'm sure that somebody out there would be able to get one, but, it doesn't even matter if we have an explanation for why it works if we know that it does work for us. So.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think that I'm different. Where if I think that especially if you're in the context of like therapy or at least an intimate conversation with another person, I really want to kind of just put 100% of my brain power into that conversation. But I think that one of the blockers to that is that I always kind of get hung up when somebody shares something too interesting. Language being as linear as it is, one thought follows another, one word after another, one sentence after another. When somebody kind of shares something with me that has kind of like multiple sparks in different areas, or, connections or associations, my ability to speak kind of just shuts down because I can't.
You would really like that Babel essay that I was reading last
The
night.
Babel essay?
Yeah, you should read that like as soon as we get back home.
Tell me about it.
Basically, he talks about how people, they don't construct entire thoughts before they say them. They construct them one word at a time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I'm going like super high pressure of speech.
That's not, yeah, like, and so when you end up in a situation where your filter is really, really high, you stop.
Your filter is really... Oh, okay. Because you read that out to me. So
yeah.
I don't think it's more of like it's not a filter problem, right? So I remember what you were saying, where it's kind of people's the pruning and was it the pruning filter is what it was?
Babel generator and the prune filter.
Yeah. Okay. So it's nothing to do with filters. Like I basically don't have a filter.
No, you need to read that essay before.
Okay.
You
I'll read it. But what I'm trying to say is that it's like if I have non-linear thoughts, or I'm thinking about two things simultaneously, which happens pretty frequently, I can't put parallel thoughts into speech which is not parallel. It is linear. It's chronistic. Whereas, especially like brainstorming, diffuse, subconscious thinking, that is chronistic, it's non-linear, it's all over the fucking place.
In that essay, the filter would be the progression from anachronistic thinking to linear.
That doesn't really seem like a filter.
Maybe it's the wrong word, but the idea being that you're generating a lot of words and thoughts, and basically you're trying to fit them together, and that process of seeing what fits and what doesn't fit is the filter.
It seems like a better word would be like a constructor, whereas a filter would be kind of making a determination on whether it is to be said, or if it's good to be said, or the context is fitting. I'll read it, but filter doesn't seem like the right word. Okay, so we were talking about the 4 R's in this podcast. So, repeatability we have. Relatability, I think that over time, certainly people would start to relate to us, or as the conversations, themes, episode after episode. It'd be a slow burn. It'd be kind of like one of those things. It's like an acquired taste, right? No.
I think some episodes will resonate with people more than others, and it'll spark curiosity, which leads to more listens, that kind of thing.
And regardless, though, I think that because our conversations are going to be a little bit of low energy, or at least kind of just a conversational hum, we could serve the purpose for other people that like Tetris serves for me when I'm listening to a podcast, or fidgeting serves, where it's almost like listening to kind of low volume music. Instead of music, it's just kind of the sounds of our voices and music in the background. So, it's not just like relatability with us, but it could also just be kind of the relatability to just having people around you and that parasocial connection as well.
I think it lowers your guards.
Lowers your guards? What do you mean?
I think that like having these sort of background things where it helps you feel more comfortable, and it distracts the parts of your mind. Because if you were to meet someone cold and try and have an intimate conversation, obviously there's going to be all kinds of things stopping you from having that conversation in a comfortable way.
Yeah, that's true.
There's going to be a lot of like pretense that you set up to try and figure out if the person is safe to talk to, if this conversation is going to make them uncomfortable, how far you're willing to go, all those things. But if you're distracting part of your brain with something else, like listening to a podcast or occupying your hands or playing a game, it lets those it lowers your guards, that like those other thoughts can sneak past, so they're not being protected anymore. The more I think about it, the more I think that this is a therapeutic technique.
Well, this is kind of getting back to, not getting back to, because it never happened in this conversation, but I was kind of talking about vulnerability and how I thought that, wow, there's so many different thoughts here. Kind of like one of the things I was talking about where I'm jumping. It's not all at once, but thoughts were like very fragmented there. So I think that the kind of conversation that happens in therapy is good, but it should happen more often in context outside of therapy, because to actually make progress as a person and kind of who you are and grow or heal or whatever it is you're doing at that time, like the 1 hour sessions with a therapist every like week or every 2 weeks is not enough. I mean, like, there's a lot of times where
But you need to lower perceived risk. I think the reason people don't own up to, have these conversations with other people as easily is because of perceived risk.
Yes. So I mean, and yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things is that, engaging in those conversations outside of a therapy session makes you vulnerable, and people who are in environments where vulnerability is taken advantage of, you very quickly learn not to do that. Or other people, when you kind of make them vulnerable, if they're using coping mechanisms, escape mechanisms, or things to distract themselves, you kind of talking like that reminds them of their own vulnerabilities, and it kind of breaks the fantasy or the delusion that they have for themselves. So
I also think we're in kind of a unique position in terms of what I see on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that, where you can kind of create dual vulnerabilities, where you have one that is specifically designed to connect with people kind of on a surface level about shared insecurities, and one that's your actual feeling.
Yeah.
You know, you're projecting
Oh yeah, like
vulnerability,
abstractions. Yeah.
and you're abstracting a real feeling into something that can be felt by many but doesn't actually produce anything.
This is kind of like what I was talking about, how people with high anxiety apologize.
Yeah.
So it's like where somebody says something, they overthink whether they should have said it, and then they apologize, and they're telling themselves that they're apologizing in order to have the person tell them whether or not what they said or did was good or bad. But social etiquette dictates that they always say that, like, oh no problem, sort of thing. When somebody apologizes, you don't actually be like, damn it, like,
So it's
you
actually
should have
a terrible
apologized.
filter.
So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, oh, you can kind of like quiet that anxious voice because it's like, oh, they said it was fine, everything was fine, but you know, it's like what you're actually seeking for is that like pseudo validation that, you know, you were okay to do that in the social setting. You've kind of put up a test that will never come back positive because of social etiquette. So a person is not actually apologizing, right? Their kind of abstracted goal is that they want to see whether or not what they said was right or wrong, but they know that it's not an accurate test of what they said was right or wrong. It's not actually going to give them reliable information, whether or not they are consciously or unconsciously aware of it. The real reason is just, again, to free themselves from the concern that what they said was wrong, you know, validate that feeling, and then just basically just put a put a Band-Aid over it and just kind of like move on. Just like, it is cope to apologize like that. You know.
But the problem being that is a circle. You'll never free yourself.
Yeah,
of
and you
that
get
urge.
into that habit because you're never going to actually figure out what is proper to say in a social setting. So you're always going to apologize just to kind of get that little comfort each and every single time, and it very quickly becomes kind of a trap. And I think this happens to people who apologize compulsively. I think that a lot of that I see is anxiety driven, and I think that
I
there's
feel very called out right now.
I wasn't going to say it. But like what I'm trying to figure out is that like I've got that dynamic in my head pretty well understood because I've like eaten at that bit for a while, but I'm trying to understand what the abstraction is for people who are overly trusting of other people or want to be trusted and trust other people and make themselves vulnerable. And I think that, you know, one of the things is that, you know, when I or another person kind of shows myself to be trusting and makes myself vulnerable by being, authentic, genuine, sincere, probably oversharing, skipping small talk or social graces or anything like that. What I'm looking for, the abstraction of that, is that I'm looking for reciprocity and that I want that person to trust and be vulnerable to me. But what I'm actually trying to accomplish beyond that, I don't quite know for sure. So I think that there is kind of this.
You don't think it's a similar situation where you're looking for that line for someone to show you to push back against it?
Well, see, I'm pretty sure that a person who is making themselves vulnerable isn't doing it as a cope. Other than maybe, See, I don't know. So it's like, what is the reason, like you and I, by making this podcast and sharing it publicly, or at least semi-publicly, we are making ourselves vulnerable, right? Because we're inviting people into a pretty private space. People are voyeurs at this point. You know, they'll be pretty self-conscious about listening in on this conversation. But it's like, you know, we are vulnerable. We're opening up. We're having these kind of more private and intimate thoughts, and people have the ability to hear them without reciprocating or really having any active involvement in it. So it's kind of like, why are we doing that, A, and why are we okay with doing that? Because I don't think that you or I are actually uncomfortable if this episode went viral.
No.
If anything, it would probably be like, you know, more people see it, will actually attract the kind of people who are interested in listening to this, who which hopefully in the future become people who we can actually talk to.
That's what I think it is. I think it's a weird trade-off where it's like you sacrifice intimacy in hopes of finding someone like you.
Yeah. And I think I'm finding that with like my businesses, and that a lot of my kind of job description postings and like hirings have been trying to search for people who I want to work with and want to work with on aligned goals. So maybe it is kind of like a trade-off where we think that, you know, it's hard enough to find people who think like we do, that it's kind of worth making ourselves vulnerable, especially if the cost of suffering or enduring an attack, which I think that you and I are pretty good at. Just like if somebody kind of went at us for anything in this conversation or anything, it'd be like, all right, and then we just like ignore them, right? But you know, if we did kind of, if somebody in this conversation did kind of find it to be what they're looking for, something they might reach out. So
That'd be worth it.
maybe it is maybe that's the reason why we're sharing is because we are trying to find like-minded people who can have kind of more of these metaphysical conversations, but it is not about trust.
No.
No, just saying. So like the act of unilaterally and proactively trusting somebody, the abstracted goal.
But I would challenge you to find an example where someone is putting out that trust so blindly. Because when I think of people I've seen...
I met one last week. He was the guy I was telling you that I had lunch with. And I
Would you
think
say that's a trust
like
situation?
I think that one of the abstractions of trust that I've kind of noticed is that people will kind of like open themselves up to becoming vulnerable because they want to do kind of like this lost puppy routine,
Yeah,
where like
that's
they
what I was
want to be
thinking.
helped or they want to be guided what to do. And I've seen this like even in like the pro leagues where I had kind of one person who was like, you know, really dejected and always kind of like beat up on themselves and made themselves really vulnerable and always like self-critiqued publicly and openly and dramatically. And it's because like
You're looking for people to tell
like
you
they
it's not that way.
yeah, they wanted them to say that like either like, you know, you're doing it right, or like actually teach them and help them and show them what was right. And those people,
And it works to some degree. If you
To
make
some
yourself
degree,
seem
but a lot of those-
profoundly lost, people will be inclined to help you.
because they will get a benefit out of it, you know,
Exactly,
they get
it's
they
for their
get,
own reasons.
like you kind of attract the kind of people who will help you out of their own selfish interest, and I think that it does work. But the problem is that it doesn't actually, you know, it's the sort of thing where again you fall into that trap where you're going to need it every single time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I get another tea?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
I
it
saw
smells
the
so
I saw
good.
the microphone peaking when you set the the stuff down, so he probably blew people's eardrums out. But
Sorry.
sorry. But what was I saying? So it's like it's the same sort of thing with the apology, where if you do that, right, if you're constantly trying to learn and be accepted by making yourself vulnerable, where people help you not
You're
out of for the
attracting the
benefit
exact
of you,
kind of person that will hurt you.
and you're going to become reliant or dependent on that,
Or jaded.
and you're not going to be learning any kind of critical thinking, synthetic thinking, anything of that variety. So,
It's another trap, you know?
yeah, it is.
And I think it's a very pervasive one.
It is, and like I see these kind of traps in like all over, and I you know, when
It's
I
a
meet a
little
new person,
upsetting.
I always kind of like, yeah.
You know?
Every time I meet a new person and have an in-depth conversation with them, I kind of, everybody has one of these traps.
I think they're really common.
Yeah, and I always wonder what my trap is, right? I don't know.
I think yours is maybe more of like a narcissistic bent.
Is it? You think so?
I think I'm not saying you're narcissistic. I just think that if you had a trap, or I think you do maybe, it would be leaning towards those qualities.
Very possible.
Like, I mean, for example, you know, people who see themselves in the role of like a hero are very unlikely to recognize it, right? Oh, thank you. Sorry.
All good.
Oh, it's
Or
delicious.
I shouldn't say
my
they're
God,
unlikely.
hot, fuck.
I shouldn't say they're unlikely to recognize it. It's more like they're unlikely to let go of it, because it's validating, but it also feels like you're helping other people and you're rescuing them from their own hubris, regardless of how true that is.
Fair
And
enough.
I feel like you get put in that position by default by a lot of other people. People
Yeah.
are looking to you to rescue them. I mean, I could definitely argue I was in that position for a time. So, and it's very flattering. That's a dangerous trap. That's hard to escape. It's like, that's a honey trap. Being set by the victim. It's the strangest situation.
You know, and it's like when I think back into my history, like I've always been kind of really good at community building and just being able to like control people through kind of group psychology, whether it was the youth program in Canada or like university or things like that.
When I think of the youth
Like,
program
I
in
definitely
Canada,
think that
though,
there is-
I think it was less finesse. Well, I mean, and that makes sense. You were
Yeah.
like 16.
Oh. Maybe it's narcissism or control or, well, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's hard, like it's a blind spot, right? Can't see your own blind spot, can't see your own shadow.
And these are also very human qualities. If someone came to me and like really badly wanted me to be a mentor to them, it would be very hard for me to refuse that offer. And it's
Especially
not-
if you respected them.
right? So it's a very gratifying feeling, and and you also most likely feel like, yes, I can help this person, and I would like to see them grow, and I want to give them all of the opportunities. We're not really well suited to dealing with that situation. And I feel like a lot of content creators who start making it big get thrown into that situation repeatedly.
Yeah. They didn't give me any chili flakes. Damn.
Come back around.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of funny because I'm in the position where I'm trying to let people, or get people to let me coach them.
Yeah.
And then when I do, it's usually a very positive experience, and there's a lot of there's a mutual relationship being built there.
Yeah.
But it's not like people are coming to me and doing Lost Puppy.
Yeah.
I just see it happening to
you
others.
you don't have a status of elevated authority yet.
No, I don't.
Or did I say that backward? Authority of elevated status. I don't remember.
There you go.
One of those. But
Anyway.
the other thing is that, like, when I'm coaching somebody, there's a lot of people who come to me for very simple things, like they just want to learn basic, like they want to learn factual knowledge, and I want to teach procedural knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a difference there. And also, I guess I am at the point where I can be selective enough where I want to coach people into doing meaningful things and accomplishing things that align with my own goals, right? So I think I'm beyond the point where the satisfaction is enough just from helping a person, where, yeah.
I think also you would be very rewarded by an experience with someone who wanted to be your student, but who is aware of all these things.
Well,
and choosing for what will be their best interest, like making sure that your interests are not.
You're talking about like an
superseding theirs.
apprentice relationship, rather than like a mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, someone who sees the value in working with you, but doesn't allow their identity to be completely absorbed by you.
I would have to think on that. I've never considered it.
I don't think that person will come along very easily.
Nope. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to think on that. But so we've got repeatable, we've got relatable.
Romantic.
Well, romantic. We could skip to number 4.
Let's do it.
I mean,
In
you
order.
and I are a couple. We are a romantic relationship.
Are we a romantic relationship? How would you define
I like to think we're romantic. Wow, I'm starting to question things now.
No, I think we are.
Goodness, I just learned something about ourselves.
That's not what I meant to say.
Sure.
I was just making a joke. Although, Mr. I don't celebrate Christmas over here. Not for any legitimate reason, just I don't like it.
I don't like taking days off. But outside of the romantic relationship between the two of us, because I'm sure there's people who would like ship or stan or anything like that, but outside of people who care about social relationships, the things that we talk about, what would be the way of romanticizing the content? Or, I mean, technically the 4R is about making popular content. Mm-hmm. And, romanticization is about kind of like the way that you talk about why romanticizing content is important is because you want to make things a little bit better than they actually are. You want to make the fantasy world a little bit romantic other than kind of the gray of the real world.
I honestly think that those conversations that we have all the time, or that I have with other people, where it's like, I would make the world run better. That's a type of romanticism. It just tends to end in nihilism.
Yeah.
It's like, this is how the world could be better, but it's not like that, so everything sucks.
I think that in that case, we wouldn't want, because romanticism is like a perversion of the truth when you're talking about, you're romanticizing the content, a romanticized version of reality, where I think that if we are going to kind of...
We'd be careful with it.
Yeah, I don't think we would want to achieve that as a goal, where maybe...
We have to watch out for it.
Yeah,
Like a
really,
little
certainly.
bell.
And have to
You're
make sure we don't
romanticizing.
drink our own Kool-Aid, or if something becomes popular, that we don't kind of talk about it or agree with it just because it's popular. So
And I do actually legitimately worry about that tendency in myself.
Oh, it's yeah.
I've noticed
like,
that I'm very porous to
just being aware of cognitive biases doesn't free you from them.
no, it just creates frustration. Now that I know why my boot sticks in the mud, doesn't change the fact that my boot sticking in the mud is driving me crazy.
Right. And then Remarkable is the last R. Technically, it's the first one.
Oh, we jumped around there.
We did, yeah. I mean, I guess the order's kind of arbitrary since I made it up in the first place, but
I mean, I guess the remarkable part is more for our experience than anyone else's. 'Cause
So,
this is kind of a neat
like-
idea.
like remarkable, yeah. So I think that the format itself is unique, and that makes it remarkable. But when you're talking about the spirit of the word remarkable as it applies to the 4 R's of content, it's more along the lines of like you want somebody to remark about it to somebody else, and it's kind of like achieving advocate status and grassroots
Which is why I
popularity.
would like to continue discussing fairly complex things, because I think that's the remarkability of it.
Yeah, because I think that like that could be definitely the way that we want this to spread is no advertising other than kind of like word of mouth stuff. Where it's because like if we find one person who's interested in listening to it, the likelihood that that person knows another person who is interested in this stuff, or if people are
Slow
talking,
but exponential.
yeah,
Kind of how Worm got big, right?
yeah. So
Started with people just running across it and friends.
yeah, so maybe we just yeah. No, I guess that kind of it's weird, but it's like I think that there's definitely a little bit of a magic to the formula, and I definitely think that
I think it would be neat too to like if we got feedback from these sessions about the things that people want to see discussed more often. Like what are the conversations that they wish they could be having?
would we want that to happen? I was thinking that
Not
it'd be
all the
better.
time,
That'd be
but-
because you and I.
We talk about everything. My concept for what the average person talks about has gone out the window.
Oh yeah, but like we're never gonna lack for anything to talk about, right?
No.
So.
We might send ourselves on like research streams in the middle of the conversation.
And it's like, I think at some point once the pandemic eases up, we could definitely have like guests join us for a lunch or a dinner or something.
That would be so much fun.
That would be kind of cool, but yeah. And just like
You could play that asshole game.
I play, yeah, I love that game. I like it. I think this is something that could change into something, right? And we can iterate on the formula, and I think as long as, like the audio quality, I'll have to play with a little bit. Whether it's like a compressor or a limiter, or where are we going to place it? What levels are best? Do I have to do any audio treatment afterwards or anything like that? But
Oh, I'm sure we'll have to do a little bit.
yeah, I'm sure. But
That's easy enough.
yeah, yep.
I have everything set up on my computer to do that.
Yeah. Well, shall we turn it off and send it to the beta testers?
Sure. Although I feel like this will be like the least structured episode ever of anything.
I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Fuck structures.
Apparently.
I mean, what the saying about, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. I mean, the less structured something is, the
More
more
authentic it
we can
feels.
the more we can iterate and evolve without. It's like, what's the saying? Like, plans are useless, planning's invaluable.
Yeah.
Where, we've talked about it before, but we can just let things evolve as naturally as possible without trying to force it into something. I think that something that naturally kind of evolves or is created in very piecemeal from very basic, humble origins is what can really, truly become something interesting. I've seen that in my own content. The stuff that I more rigorously or strictly design is always worse than the kind of content ideas that emerge naturally.
Doesn't it drive you crazy?
Yes, absolutely. So
It's like, this should work. Why is it not
let's just
working?
see where this goes.
Yeah, I'm down.